Eventually, the lines get very blurred of what's real and what's a YouTube video.
I didn't tell my mom.
You never know what's real and what's not.
It doesn't matter as long as it looks good. They can shut up and do it.
Just a prank!
They were not fun when you were the one getting pranked.
Why are you doing this? It doesn't even make sense. Whenever Tiffany started doing the things to me and Reese, we saw her do it to Piper as well.
Tiffany would tell Piper that these were just mean, evil people wanting her money.
We were filming like 10 to 15 videos a day.
If you leave the squad, you're going to get blacklisted.
It's like a cult or something, like you can't get out.
I remember being so scared.
If I were watching this show, I'd be like, idiots. I already know what I would say. Why the hell would you stay around for that? 100%. Why anyone kept their kid in that environment, I would not understand. But it's so complex.
I just watched Netflix's entire new docuseries, Bad Influence, The Dark Side of Kidfluencing, so you don't have to. And now we are on to episode 3 of the docuseries.
I feel like this wouldn't be happening to my kids.
After we filed our lawsuit in early 2022, YouTube demonetized Piper's account. Basically, she could still post, but she wouldn't be able to make any money for it. So her revenue from YouTube went from $500,000-$600,000 a month to zero.
So in episode 3 of Bad Influence, The Dark Side of Kidfluencing, this one is called #unfollow, and this is essentially when all of the cover-ups start happening, or when Piper is basically starting to be instrumental in the cover-ups to support her mom. We see her crying on screen, protecting her mom, and saying how she feels so bad for her mom and everything that her mom has had to go through. We also hear former squad members talking about how whenever there was some kind of big upset, that Piper's mom would take Piper and go for like a really, really long drive, and then she would come back and Piper would just go directly up to her room. Nobody knew what happened on these drives. But there's this one video that goes up on YouTube, and it's Piper and Eliana and 2 more members, and essentially they're going through a list of everybody that's left the squad, and she's addressing how everybody that leaves the squad says it's because it's toxic and blames her mom, but in reality that they're the toxic ones. And then she goes through on her phone and shows her like deleting and blocking everybody that was a former squad member on Instagram. So basically just encouraging the viewers to do the same thing, because she knows it's kids that are watching this and they're going to be encouraged by the same behavior that they're seeing on screen, so they're going to go do the same thing. So it's basically like revenge, and that's what starts this whole bullying campaign against all the previous squad members, and that's what this whole episode is going to be about. So it's kind of interesting what they allege had happened, especially on the back end with social media, but we'll get into that. Then they start talking about how Piper's mom, Tiffany, uses Piper's Instagram account and other social media accounts to talk trash basically about everybody, but specifically 2 kids as well. And we talked about this in other Piper Raquel videos here on my channel, where we were covering a bunch of DMs that were leaked that Piper's mom sent to a bunch of other people from Piper's account. She's always pretending to be Piper when she's sending these messages, but it's clear that they're all coming from Tiffany. Then they go on to accuse Tiffany and Hunter for destroying people's channels once they leave the squad, and I don't know how much I believe about this. I feel like I would need to see more evidence to form a real opinion, but I honestly don't personally believe that this is a thing. But basically what they were alleging is that their channels would tank as soon as they left the group, before it even went public and before people had even heard about it. So that's why they have this suspicion that it was Tiffany and Hunter, or at least they allege that that's when their channels tanked. And then they said that they found their channels linked and embedded in other websites where basically adults go to look at adult content, we'll say, and that if YouTube sees that on the back end, that it's going to start shadow banning your channel, and that's what they allege happened. I don't know how much about that I believe. I guess that could be the case, but what I think is more than likely is if they were actually inflating Piper's numbers with bots and all of her engagement with bots, that they were probably also paying to inflate all of the channels of the people that were in the squad to make their channels look successful. So all of the success and engagement that they were seeing may not have been actually real, but the second that they left the squad, they stopped paying for this artificial engagement of all of these likes and shares and views. And that's what my theory is what actually happened. It would be pretty extensive to go pay, or however you would get your channel or get these kids' channels embedded in these sites. outside of YouTube. I don't know how you would even go about doing that. A lot of this episode is just a lot more expletive than I can talk about here on YouTube. It's a lot more explicit. There's lots of talk about SA and a lot of graphic details about things that happened to the girls that were in the squad by Tiffany while they were staying at her house, and things that she did to the boys in the squad, and it basically seems to be to everybody. But essentially in this episode, they break down everything that all of the 11 former squad members talked about in their lawsuit towards Tiffany, and that's where they go into all of these details that I can't talk about in so much detail. But if you want to watch the documentary on Netflix or the docuseries, then you can hear all the details there. I'm just not going to personally mention them here on my channel. But the kids are mourning their younger selves and everything that they went through. The parents allege that it wasn't until this lawsuit that all of the dark, seedy stuff that was happening behind the scenes actually came forward, and that the kids were too afraid to speak up about it or something. I'm not sure how much of that I believe, especially when the kids are getting text messages from this mom. Like, as a parent, shouldn't you be checking on your child's phone, especially when they're like 12 years old? But after this lawsuit, that's when things start crumbling apart for the Piper Raquel empire. Like, they start losing brand deals left, right, and center. Her YouTube channel gets demonetized because YouTube reserves the right to demonetize any channel if you are in like external media or anything that's going to be bringing negative attention towards the platform. And this usually only happens to like the biggest YouTube scandals in all time, like Logan Paul. So for that to have happened to Piper is crazy, but that happened to her channel.
I feel like this wouldn't be happening to my kids.
After we filed our lawsuit in early 2022, YouTube demonetized Piper's account. Basically, she could still post, but she wouldn't be able to make any money for it. So her revenue from YouTube went from $500,000-$600,000 a month to zero.
So she basically went from $600,000 a month in ad revenue and just AdSense alone to zero, plus lost all of the brand deals. And Piper's mom, that's when Tiffany basically started to pivot and figure out other ways that she was going to be able to make money off of Piper. Kind of like what we talked about in my last video, where I was talking about how all of the mommy vloggers and stuff just started to pivot once the COPPA Act was enabled here on YouTube. So it was during this diversification period that Piper started posting heavily on Snapchat, because there's no comment section on Snapchat, so it's like less regulated, I guess, and they can just continue doing the same things that they were doing over there. And they also talk about Brand Army, and essentially Brand Army, we've talked about here on this channel as well with Piper, is a website that is for people that are like 18 plus, but you go onto this website and it's kind of like OF in that you go on and you buy materials from these people. So it's basically a kid's version of OF that they're hosting, where they have child influencers selling stuff on here, but it's only adults that are actually accessing the website to purchase anything. Why a website like this is even able to exist, to me, is highly questionable. Then the moms of the former squad members say, because of the lawsuit, every single mom was contacted by the FBI and they did a thorough investigation, but they hadn't heard anything about it ever since.
That's the last I heard from the FBI agent, and that's the last I heard from the detective. So I don't know.
But basically they told them that they won't try a case unless they basically know it's a for sure win. So they haven't heard anything back from the FBI, but it kind of leads them to believe that there was no surefire evidence to support a case for them.
Lawmakers are often 70 to 80 years old. They don't take this world seriously at all. They still treat this industry as a joke. The government has absolutely no appetite to implement any sort of meaningful regulations on this industry. They make fun of it. They mock it.
The rest of this episode talks about some more things, like I said, in graphic detail that I can't talk about here in my video, but mostly to do with SA. And then they talk a lot about government legislation around social media and social media for kids, and just a lot of things that we covered in the last video that I posted about kids working in social media and how there's no regulation and legislation, and that the more that we talk about this, that the more things are finally starting to be heard, and at least lawmakers are listening. But if you're interested in that topic, I'll leave my last video in the pinned comment where we were discussing what is the future for kids in entertainment, specifically on social media. Is there going to be laws? Are there going to be things like the Kidfluencing Act enabled for kids for social media entertainment, because it's definitely a gray area. So if you're interested in more, you can watch that. But in 2024, this lawsuit was settled for $1.85 million, and that was dispersed amongst the 11 former squad members. So that's not bad. I don't know if that's really justice, but it's something. And because it was settled instead of being tried, Tiffany and Hunter have not accepted any guilt over or any wrongdoing over anything. And the documentary basically ends here. They refused to comment, refused to interview, they denied all allegations, and they settled it for the money in court. And that's basically where we're left off today, with Piper working for Brand Army and doing work with OF House creators. Doesn't sound like much has changed. I made a video about what I think is going to be the aftermath of this docuseries. I'll leave that in the pinned comments as well, but that's all, folks.